Good afternoon. This is Jay Snodgrass, and this is Animal Magic. Today we'll be talking about Shakespeare and shapeshifters, and I'm really excited. I have with me today Mason Winfield. Please.
Mason Winfield here. I'm an author of mostly upstate folklore and fiction, and I'm a Shakespeare buff. And I'm in the company of a true Shakespearean scholar right now, and he's kind enough not to embarrass me. But yet it doesn't mean I can't contribute something. So,
Please do.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you. So, Mason, there is this monologue, and it's kind of tucked away in Shakespeare's play, The Merry Wives of Windsor, which in some ways, the story seems to be, in some ways, kind of a spiritual sequel to A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which the two young ladies are married now, and things are kind of coming apart for them. This guy, Falstaff, comes into town. He wants to seduce them. And now the two of them come up with this prank to teach him a lesson. And one of them recalls this old regional story. So this is from the fourth act of Merry Wives of Windsor. She says, "There is an old tale goes that Herne the hunter, sometime a keeper here in Windsor forest, doth all the winter time, at still midnight, walk round about an oak with great ragged horns. And there he blasts the tree, and takes the cattle, dairy cows yield blood, he shakes a chain in a most hideous and dreadful manner. You have heard of such a spirit, and well you know the superstitious idle-headed eld received and did deliver to our age this tale of Herne the hunter for a truth. Why yet there now are many that do fear, in deep of night to walk by this Herne's oak." So we've got this kind of regional legend of a man with antlers. He is in chains. He's kind of trapped under this oak tree.
Well, Herne would have been an evolution of the Celtic antler god, Cernunnos. And he would have been, the Celts, the British Celts, Irish Celts, didn't really have a direct pantheon like the Romans and Greeks. There was a much closer status between the general fairies and the fairy kings and queens. But Cernunnos would have been a major figure, and I think maybe the Gauls, French Celts, Cernunnos, and whatever figure they were calling him might have been a bigger form. But he's a woodland figure, woodland god. And I think the fact that in this local legend, this figure is chained and under a tree sort of represents the Christianization, which tended to diminish the figures of the indigenous mythology and even satanize them after a while. And he does have the horns.
Certainly that happens with the horned god. I've heard that it may be that the English word horn comes from Cernunnos, comes from Herne. Well, and the horned man chained under the tree is the opening image in Frazer's The Golden Bough, in which the goddess has this kind of male consort who is kind of stuck under the tree. And there he awaits, mortal combat with the person who will replace him.
Yeah, the Nemean Grove. I didn't remember that part about being chained under the tree. I do remember that graphic, grim, wonderful image of the midsummer, I believe it's Midsummer's Eve, right? The solstice, maybe?
I think so.
When the challenger, the king is dead, long live the king, but whoever wins this sword fight in the Nemean Grove is the king for another year. And it's a sacrificial ritual. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's Frazer's central point that this ritual is solar and vegetative. It's based on the cycles of nature and the tendency that ancient people believe that you need to not only appease the powers of nature, but you kind of wanted to show them what you wanted them to do.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you'd
Well, and that it was there to like maintain the balance of power between male and female. That no male king could, that it was not hereditary. It was not something that you like won and you had it for the rest of your life and you gave it to your son, but that you could be the king of the forest for 1 year. And that at the end of that time, then you were replaced, to make sure that no one could kind of build up the kind of power that we associate with the divine right of kings. And Frazer, follows this in many different, world mythologies, and certainly I would say, in stories like Diana and Actaeon, like I do feel like we have the pieces, kind of the mythical echoes of that.
Well, Actaeon is certainly a sacrificed figure. And I think Frazer has a whole chapter called Attis, Adonis, Osiris.
Uh-huh.
All about sacrificed, guys that end up getting killed. And it's not exactly a sacrifice, but yet if it's predestined and you get killed for a sacred purpose, by whatever cause, it's symbolically a sacrifice.
Well, and killed during a seasonal ritual, which, I mean, Attis, Adonis, Osiris, they always die at a certain time of year, which implies that it's a seasonal ritual, that it's something that does happen every year. And in Wicca, as I understand it, there is, the Trinitarian goddess who, like the phases of the moon, journeys from, youth into maturity, into like kind of wisdom and death, and then returns to youth. But then the male god, the lord of the dance or the lord of the hunt, the horned god, is kind of more of a solar deity, like someone who has, and there, by that rationale is replaced
the very
at
radiance,
midsummer.
the upward radiance of the deer antlers is the sunlight bursting over the horizon.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even here in Western New York, a Seneca chieftain would be presented with antlers at the time of his, when he was kind of being conferred that power by the grandmothers.
Yep.
Who would replace one chieftain with the other. They would take the horns from one and give him. If he
turned himself into a pain, they would have the ceremony to dehorn him.
That's right. The power of impeachment and replace him, but that then they could put the antlers on another man without a human sacrifice. People get really mad about the Falstaff in A Merry Wives of Windsor. Apparently,
he is a blockhead.
Well, there's a kind of a rumor that Queen Elizabeth herself really liked the character of Falstaff in the Henry plays, and then was very saddened by his death, and that she kind of, personally requested.
I had not heard that.
That William Shakespeare bring him back.
That I hadn't heard. I had heard that it was popular request, that Falstaff was just such a beloved comic character.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the rumors is that Queen Elizabeth said to Shakespeare she wanted to see, quote, Falstaff in love. And that, so Shakespeare kind of takes it in this direction of having him come to town. And it's not even so much that he wants to seduce these women. It's that he comes to town and he wants to make a fool out of these two husbands. And he pursues these women, and then they play this prank on him, that they lure him out into the forest, and they tell him to put on, now in the final script, they tell him to put on antlers. Although in one of the earlier folio editions, he comes onto the stage with a full buck's head. Kind of like Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And that he's wearing these chains, he's got the head of a buck, and that, he who wanted to make kind of horned cuckolds of these two husbands, he is tricked into coming out.
Suddenly,
and then there's this fairy ritual which in the play, like village children come out and they put on this fairy ritual. They put on this fairy dance. So then during this kind of fairy ritual under the tree with Falstaff, with the horns and he's confined, then this figure comes onto the stage that is called Hobgoblin. Now, I wonder, Hobgoblin is one of the nicknames of Robin Goodfellow or Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Do you feel that Hobgoblin and Puck would be the same character? Do you feel like Shakespeare could be bringing this back?
No. I mean, certainly possible. Do you remember if Hobgoblin is a first name or if it's just what it is? Do you remember that? Is it because they use Puck. Puck is generic. So is a Hobgoblin. The word goblin, it could even be related to Puck in a way, but because the way language operates and changes over time. But remember when we chatted a little bit earlier, we mentioned that there were trooping fairies. There are fairies that live in kingdoms, and there are solitary ones. Uh-huh. Well, among the solitaries, there were fairies that lived in nature, which, wouldn't you agree, that's Puck?
Oh, absolutely.
All the imagery associated with Puck is very outdoors. Mm-hmm. Well, the Hobgoblin would have been a domestic fairy, would have lived in your house.
Interesting.
And the hob is a type of, as I gathered, it's a type of kitchen device we don't have anymore, but it was, they did their cooking over basically a live fire. Uh-huh. Made a fire in an oven. And it was really handy to have this swiveling metal kind of like tabletop. Just about the size of your laptop, but you could swivel it. And
like a hub.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh. Well, you could put stuff on it, and you'd swivel it over the fire, and the stuff would heat up. And then you just get a tool and swivel it out. And
wow.
That was a hob. Okay. And people ask me, my students used to ask me, what's the difference between a hobgoblin and a goblin? And I'd say, well, just think of a regular goblin and imagine one that's a little bit hobbier. But then I'd explain what the hob was.
And what I've heard about it is that hob is was another name for Robin Goodfellow, like the hobby horse, the hobgoblin, one of the May Day, one of the Morris dance symbols.
Wouldn't shock me.
Like hob, hood, Robin of the Hood, like hobgoblin. That all of these are kind of different regional pronunciations.
There absolutely is an overlap between the folkloric Robin Hood and figures of Celtic mythology.
Well, the Robin of the Hood, meaning really like the oak log. And in Midsummer Night's Dream, when Puck meets one of Titania's fairies, she says, I think some hobgoblin call you. Like some people call you hobgoblin. Yeah. Some call you Puck. It's
the classification of fairy beings is not an exact art.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot of overlap. It depends on which writer you're reading, and it's only generic sense we can make out of this stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if this writer calls Puck a hobgoblin and this one calls him something different. That's all I can say about that.
Well, it's something that really fascinates me in these two stories, Midsummer Night's Dream, Merry Wives of Windsor, is that the fairy is such a symbol of anarchic, like, mischief. And yet, in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck and Oberon, like, they don't go stalking these girls in the wood. They are instead very protective and protecting them from mischief in the wood. And then in Merry Wives of Windsor, when again these two women are being stalked by this kind of predatory Falstaff, the fairies come out and they like punish him. They kind of ritually shame him for that. And then this somehow seems to summon the fairy queen and this being this being hobgoblin, who show up, and they are part of this shaming ritual. They're part of this Skimmington, that's what it was. Part of like a Skimmington ritual of punishing this guy for kind of breaking like the social order.
Yeah, well, he doesn't really get punished too bad. And the classic image of the fairies, at least by the Renaissance time, the classic picture of them is that they can be righters of wrongs, and they're going to look mean. They're going to look bad to you if you're doing something wrong and they're punishing you for it, and they're going to look good to you if they're protecting you. So, doesn't surprise me. They have classically two sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I guess in a way, returning to the story of Actaeon and Diana, the story in which this hunter, and he is a predator and he is a stalker, and then he glimpses this goddess bathing, and she's a hunter, but for a moment she is vulnerable and she is naked, and she says to him, like, you will not go and tell people that you have successfully stalked me, that you have seen me in this way. And she transforms him into a stag. He is then eaten by his own dogs and presumably by his own men. And it is a punishment, I think with some parallel to this punishment of Falstaff, that he comes into the wood, he is a predator, he thinks that he's got the upper hand, and that then instead he gets punished by, the fairy queen, maybe standing in for Titania, maybe standing in for Diana of the woodland.
Well, that is an old motif, that this one particular kind of goddess is very protective of her modesty and that of all women in a way. She is the protector of, and not all women either want or need that kind of protection, but yet, that's a pretty archetypal role in the Mediterranean, and it's in a way a beautiful motif. You've seen Ben Jonson's little lyric Queen and Huntress Chaste and Fair. Oh, that is gorgeous.
And it seems to have been one of Shakespeare's favorite stories, the Diana and Actaeon, which he brings up in Love's Labour's Lost, where like the princess is kind of brought to this like gaming reserve, but then she becomes a deer hunter. Then she becomes a bow hunter, and she talks about how getting married is going to be like deer hunting. Shakespeare brings it up in Julius Caesar,
sure,
where the assassins are referred to like Actaeon's dogs. It's one of those stories that he keeps. It is my.
There are recurring motifs in Shakespeare.
Somebody asked me recently, "What is your favorite, mythology?" And for me, my favorite mythical story is the story of Actaeon and Diana. Like, it's something that I can really relate to.
Wow. I'll have to think of mine. I won't take your time up doing it, but maybe the next time we talk, I'll have figured out what my favorite myth is. I think I like Perseus. I'm a Leo, I love these adventurous solar heroes,
Well, and, Sir James Frazer's the Golden Bough, which I know is out of style with scholars right now.
I don't care.
He has become, I think he's become like the guy chained under the tree that everybody wants to kill and replace, which is too bad, because he seems to be having so much fun. When you read the book, The Golden Bough, Sir James Frazer, he's got that kind of snippy sense of humor about him, and he really seems to be enjoying himself, and that's part of what I think makes the book so enjoyable. And I would think that it was William Shakespeare's favorite book, except that it had not come out yet. The whole field of comparative mythology, the whole field of Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung, the collective unconscious,
I love those guys.
Which I think has really gone out of fashion. And I think it has been kind of determined now that there is no collective unconscious, there is no common denominator in mythology, and that...
Determined by who?
Well,
I don't agree with that.
Well, and...
I didn't determine that.
I do. I do believe that Campbell, James Frazer, Robert Graves, I do think that these, that these thinkers and authors do still have something important to contribute.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I also understand that it's kind of gone out of style.
Don't forget how trendy
But
education is.
But I guess I would have to kind of put William Shakespeare in that as well, because William Shakespeare drew from these different mythologies, and I think found some deep commonalities that we are still looking at, and that still have something interesting to teach us, and that Shakespeare had these favorite archetypes and myths.
Something interesting to teach us and something beautiful to give us. But I would tell you, one of the best evidences, there is great mystery about the figure of William Shakespeare. One of the best evidences that the author of Shakespeare's plays was a country kid, likely to have come from Stratford, is the fact that the myths and folklore of the common people of the countryside were so facile to him. They were just a lingua franca for him. And
yeah. I actually do. I'm one of the few people on earth who actually does think William Shakespeare wrote the works of William Shakespeare.
No, you're not one of the few. Actually, among responsibles, acknowledged scholars, the authorship's question is trendy, but it's not. Why? Shakespeare's contemporaries were not confused about who he was. Ben Jonson, why would Ben Jonson write that long lyric to Shakespeare if he wasn't who he was? Who was he drinking with on the weekend of Shakespeare's birthday up in Stratford when Shakespeare got the malady that put him under? For all I know,
he drank himself to death.
Yeah, for all I know, he got so hammered that he passed out on the street, and on April 23rd or whatever in northern England, that might be Midland England, that might be a little clammy out.
All right, well, this has been great, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mason Winfield, for joining me today.
Thanks for one of the best conversations I've had in a while.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to doing this again.
Until next time.
And we will, and we'll also pick up another piece of this conversation in Mason's series. Could you tell us a little bit about your series?
Yeah, I have a real short podcast series called Sci Friday with Mason, and the Sci is PSI, not like science fiction or something. It's PSI, which is the Greek letter that looks like the cactus. Basically, it's a 5 to 10 minute weekly comment on something supernatural / paranormal. And I'm sure salient parts of my discussion with Jay Snodgrass will be on it.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.